Hey guys, welcome to our final session this week, our last hour on this, on silent film, German Expressionism, modernism, the introduction to all of these contextual factors and ideas so that we've got a better understanding as we go into watching Sunrise next week, our key text for this topic, okay? First thing I want to talk about today is the legacy and the influence of German Expressionism, okay? It's one of the most wildly influential film movements in the history of cinema. Certainly if you take into account the fact that it was one of the first ever film movements and continues to be a gigantic influence on cinema today. So that's an incredible kind of the power of this film movement. So I want to talk a little bit about that just to start this session before we then go on to look at Sunrise and introduce that a little bit more specifically, okay? So legacy and influence, if you can go on the PowerPoint to slide 19, okay, and just get slide 19 up, you'll see there, I've got kind of 6 images just plucked from the history of cinema, cinema that came after German Expressionism to look at the influence of it. And I just want to talk you through those little pictures there so that you can then go and seek out films that have been influenced by this movement as well. And perhaps you'll then think about, oh, I've seen this film and I've seen that film, and that's going to be the next task. So, slide 19, top left on the top row is obviously that's Johnny Depp in Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands. Do you remember when Tim Burton was good? Do you remember that? Before you were born. Quite frankly, he hasn't been good in your lifetimes. I would say Ed Wood, what's that, 95? That's the last time Tim Burton was good. It's been a continual decline since then. But he did make Edward Scissorhands, he did make Batman Returns, he did make Ed Wood. He made some good stuff, okay? Edward Scissorhands is obviously hugely inspired by German Expressionism. His entire Gothic aesthetic, the Burton's entire aesthetic is kind of like hand-lifted from German Expressionism, really. And his work is saturated with references to German Expressionism. Batman Returns, I think Christopher Walken plays a character called Max Schreck. Max Schreck obviously is the actor who played Nosferatu, one of the key German Expressionist texts. And if you just look there at Johnny Depp as Edward Scissorhands, you hopefully can see the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the image on the opening of this PowerPoint. If you go back and look at it now, you'll see that they're very, very, very similar. The castle, the shadows, the light, his entire career, but Edward Scissorhands as well, specifically really influenced by German Expressionism. Next to that, you'll see Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, all the Universal horror movies of the 1930s. So the Universal as a studio, as a Hollywood studio, became clearly we've talked about this before, that studios would become identified with a specific genre. So MGM were associated with lavish Technicolor musicals, and Warner Brothers were associated with kind of gangster pictures and kind of crime pictures. Universal became associated with horror, and they made their monster movies, and Boris Karloff's Frankenstein was a key figure, and that even from that clip there, even from that frame that you can see there, clearly the lighting, the aesthetic, this is German Expressionism in terms of its influence. Next to that, we should all know, that's Psycho, and Hitchcock was hugely influenced by German Expressionist aesthetic. And ideas about guilt and ideas about coercion, about manipulation. They're all the way through Hitchcock's work. Obviously the Freudian connection. Freud was a huge influence to the German Expressionist filmmakers, and Freud, as we know too well, is a huge influence for Hitchcock. So that image there from Psycho, the backlight, the chiaroscuro lighting, and then those Freudian ideas that are swimming around in the work of Hitchcock is clearly goes back to German Expressionism as well. Second row at the bottom, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, and we've talked about him a little bit in reference to Anton Chigurh, actually, as a kind of reference point, the kind of pale face and the blood red lips and the odd accent and etc., the kind of gender fluidity. We talked about it in relation to that, but you can see that's another Universal monster movie, the Dracula movies, and a direct link to Nosferatu as well, the key German Expressionist text. In the middle there we've got one of the opening sequences from Citizen Kane, Orson Welles, really influenced by German Expressionism, their use of light and cinematography and composition, as you can see in that opening sequence there from Citizen Kane, or one of the few sequences at the beginning. And then the final image there of the guy in the tunnel is from The Third Man, which is Carol Reed's just incredible film noir, again starring Orson Welles and Joseph Cotten, and that's full of not only cinematography and lighting like that, but it's full of those oblique Dutch canted camera angles to tell us something's not right with the world. So film noir in general was hugely influenced by the aesthetic of German Expressionism as well. This is what makes film movements so beautiful, is that they just exist here. They just exist. They're so transient. They kind of come into existence. They're willed into existence by a variety of different things, kind of like society and culture and politics and art, and suddenly all these things coalesce, and then the movement is there, and the movement might last for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 films in its purest form, and then things will start to shift and filmmakers will start to do different things, and this aesthetic will change and that theme will replace that one, and maybe the camera will go here and then they'll bring in a different genre, and then before you know it, it's just gone. And it's been this beautiful little moment, and that's what's great about film movements. And when they're important film movements like German Expressionism, they remain. And they influence, as you can see here. I want you to take 5 minutes. I want you to see if you can think of films you've seen that you would argue, or that you could argue, were influenced by German Expressionism in terms of their lighting, in terms of their colour, in terms of their cinematography, in terms of their set design, in terms of their themes. Think about it. Now, knowing what you know about German Expressionism, can you think of any films that you have seen that have clearly been influenced by it? Take 5 minutes. I'll see you back here. Cheers. Okay, welcome back. I hope you could think of some, okay? And you can see the influence of and how important this film movement is, just massively significant, okay? What I want to do now is move on to look at Sunrise a little bit more specifically as we're leading up to that and the watching of that next week. So if you just go to slide 20 in the PowerPoint, that's the section and the title and the full title of the film, how many marks the question is, and the specialist area and what it's called. So can you just take kind of like 2 minutes just to write that information down, so you've got it, so you know the full title of the film, you know the component and the section, you know what the specialist area is, you know how many marks it's worth. So just take 2 minutes, write that down. We'll be back here. 2, go. And stop. You have to do things to amuse yourself, don't you? Because, I mean, I'm just here, you know. So, let's talk a little bit more about this component and this section, okay? Just go to slide 21 for me, okay? Silent film. So that's the name of the section in general. So I just want to talk you through some of these things so we know what our focus is in a little bit more detail now for the exam specifically. We've done all the context, we've done the wider thing. So that hopefully you can see. It doesn't just happen, this is planned, okay? So we've started right out here with the Weimar Republic and the silent era of cinema and modernism, and then Germany, and then Expressionism, and then German Expressionism, and then its history, and now we're here at the topic, okay? So let's focus. As usual, 2 questions. You'll have a choice of 2 questions. You pick one and you answer one. It's a 20-mark question, so it's shorter. You'll be writing for about half an hour, and essentially it'll be kind of an introduction. When you're answering the question, it'll be an introduction, your paragraph where you argue, and then you provide evidence for that with the sequence from the film that you analyse, and then a counter-argument in relation to the question, get into a debate, conclusion. That's what we're looking at, okay? Highly likely that at least one of the questions is going to focus on this debate, the specialist area, which is the realist versus the expressive. Realist cinema versus expressionistic cinema. Okay? It will centre around that. We're going to go into a lot more detail on that as we travel through the weeks. But for now, we're going to have a look at that today a little bit as well. But that's our debate. That's our key debate. That's definitely, I mean, we can never say for definite, can we? But 99% certain that that's going to show up there in at least one of those questions on this topic. Essentially, it's going to ask us to argue about whether cinema has a duty, like an obligation, to be as realist as it can possibly be, to document the world in as realist a way as it can, or whether it should use all of the tools at its disposal, all of its technology, all of its kind of the camera, the mise-en-scène, editing, all the film form, to be as expressive and stylistic as it can possibly be. That's the debate. That's the big debate of this topic. Should cinema be realist? Should cinema be expressive? Okay. We might also get a question that's focused on one of the core elements. And remember our 3 core elements. 1, film form. Might just be a really focused question on mise-en-scène, for example, or cinematography. Meaning and response, it might ask us about what these films mean, about the response we might have to these films, or to this film, or a context question, wherein everything we've looked at so far is going to come in very, very handy indeed. And even if we don't get a specific context question, all of this context is going to feed into those high-level A-star, A-grade works, and that's what we want. Okay? So, bit of an overview. Slide 22. So that was slide 21. Slide 22. This is what I want to spend the majority of the rest of this lesson on, okay? Is this debate. And we're going to do the debate in much more detail. We're going to come back to it having studied the context of this debate, okay? But I'm really interested now in what you might say without the context of the debate. I'm interested in what you might say from here, okay, or from here in terms of what you think about cinema so far. So my question to you, right, as you can see on slide 22, what do you think? Do you think cinema, with its unique ability to literally capture the realism of the living world, does it have a duty to do that? Okay, because remember, nothing else can do that. Nothing else can do that. Theatre and books and music, only cinema really, the film camera, can capture the reality of the world around us. And so therefore, that's an incredible thing. Do we have a duty as filmmakers? Do filmmakers have a duty to capture the world around them in as realistic a way as possible? Okay? Or do you think that cinema should use all of the tools, all of the technical tools at its disposal to communicate not an objective reality, but to communicate a subjective experience, to communicate a highly expressive, exaggerated, distorted version of the real world, something that's stylistic, heavily stylistic? What do you think? What I want you to do now is I want you to spend 20 minutes and I want you to actually write a little speech, okay? Doesn't need to be any longer than a page long, okay? But I want you to sell me your idea. Sell me your idea. What do you think? Which one do you think? And you might have one for both. Write both. You might really firmly believe in one side of this argument. Write that. But I want to be convinced by your argument. And I want it to be passionate. And I don't want you to worry about the context. I want you to think about you. And then when we return to this next week or the week after, and we've looked at the context leading up to this debate, what the academics and writers, people like, especially Andre Bazin, who's going to be our absolute key figure here. You can probably hear my cat meowing. I need to feed him. He'll get fed. Don't worry about that. So when we've looked at the context, it will be interesting to see if your opinions change. Okay? But for now, don't worry about that. Write me a page. You've got 20 minutes, and then I want you to email me that document, or it can just be in the email. Sell me your argument. Should cinema be this, or should cinema be that? You've got 20 minutes, and then I want them emailed over to me. Off you go. danke. Thank you for that. Thank you for sending them over. I really look forward to reading through those and seeing if you can convince me. I certainly have a very strong opinion. How weird that I might have a strong, unmovable opinion on cinema. It's almost as if people around me, close friends and family, really don't like that about me. But that's a different story. So, I just want to introduce now, final thing, introduce our film Sunrise, which we're going to start watching next week. Okay? So if you just go to slide 23, it's the last thing we're going to do. So the film is called Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans. It was made in 1927. Okay? So let's go through these points. So F.W. Murnau, the director of Sunrise, had established himself as one of the key figures of German Expressionism. Specifically, his two films, Nosferatu and Faust, were hailed as masterpieces. Please do seek them out. They are just wonderful films. And Murnau was clearly just head and shoulders above almost everybody else. Maybe him and Fritz Lang were the key German Expressionist filmmakers. Over in America, okay then, we talked about how Hollywood was still finding its feet around this time. William Fox was the head of 20th Century Fox. He was a huge figure, a huge studio mogul, and we learnt about those when we did Hollywood Film. And he invited Murnau over specifically to Hollywood and gave him absolute free rein, whatever budget he wanted, all the technology at their disposal, everything to come over and make a kind of super production, to take arguably at this point the greatest director in the world, Murnau, from the greatest national cinema in the world at this point, the most exciting, Germany, pluck him over, pump in a bunch of American money and resources, let's make a super production. And Murnau, yeah, I'm into it. He did it. Okay, he came over to Hollywood. At this point, 20th Century Fox, they were modestly successful as a studio. They wanted prestige. That's what they wanted. They wanted people to look at their work and think, this is art. This is good work. Okay. Murnau, at this point in his career, considered the greatest filmmaker in the world. Pretty much, it was perfect for them. They've got the money. Pluck him over, and let's make a big, serious kind of film, taking the best of American cinema and the best of kind of German cinema and making this super production. Okay. Sunrise was made in 1927. It was absolutely groundbreaking piece of cinema. It was packed full of innovation, especially in terms of its cinematography. He built these new things that you just never seen anything like this. And the cinema, even when you watch it now, the cinematography is stunning, absolutely stunning. The way the camera moves and the way the camera films things, just astonishing, really, when you think about it. It won 2 Oscars. Including the first ever Best Actress Oscar, Best Actress Award. Okay, it's now widely considered to be one of the greatest films ever made. Okay, it came 5th in Sight and Sound's famous poll that's conducted every 10 years. Scorsese, I think, considers it the greatest film ever made, if not one of the top 3 greatest films for him that's ever been made. And we know how important that Sight and Sound poll is. You know, it's everybody, film writers, academics, reviewers, directors, people in the industry, everybody, okay? They poll everybody once a decade, and we know that Vertigo is number 1, but Sunrise is number 5. So it gives you an idea of the esteem that it's still held in, you know, almost 100 years after it was made. I want you to go into this with an open mind. Silent cinema is different, okay? Silent cinema is different. Film from 100 years ago is different, not just in terms of how it looks and sounds, but in terms of kind of what it says, its gender politics, how it works. This is a film that won't feel necessarily contemporary, like, you know, you don't look at it and go, oh yes, this was made yesterday, this was made 100 years ago, nearly 90 years ago. It's a masterpiece, okay? And I want you to go with it. I want you to open your heart up to it, okay? This is a silent film from 90 years ago. And it's still considered one of the greatest films ever made. Do not close yourself off to it. Think about everything we've studied so far. Think about how exciting everything is that we've looked at so far. Okay, we've looked at silent cinema as one of the most fertile and creative periods in the entire of human history. And this is its pinnacle. Sunrise is its pinnacle. It's released the same year that sound is introduced in silent cinema. It's over. This is the last hurrah for silent cinema, the peak of it, the peak of one of the most creative explosions in human history. Incredible to think about it like that. And then you've got that entire modernist movement. This is born out of a time where people had said, this is enough, scrap everything that we've done, we're starting again. So unbelievably exciting time period. And then if you factor in German Expressionism as the most exciting cinema in the world at this point, what's not to love, okay? So we'll be back here next week and we'll watch it. Thanks for your hard work this week. I really hope these lessons, doing them this way, have worked out. I've enjoyed doing them. I hope they're making some difference to you. Have a great weekend. See you next week.